Alright, so they showed the cast, and the cast looks pretty good for this. But what else do they need to do to make sure this live action Avatar movie is actually good? Hey, what's up, Nerd fam? It's your boy Gashawn. I want to welcome you to Enter the Nerd. So today we're going to be talking about the live action Avatar film for Netflix. Now, obviously this hasn't come out, but they did just release some pictures of the casting for Aang, Katara, Sokka, and Zuko. And I'll say the good thing is they're actually Asian. It's a good thing because obviously even in the show, each group, each nation represented a different ethnicity within Asian culture, which is pretty obvious, right? It's just one of them things that they shouldn't have messed up. Jackson Rathbone should not have been in this movie. What is it, Noah Ringer? This didn't make any sense. This actually makes sense here. They look cool, and they seem to be around the right age group as well, which is also great. Now, it's good to have the casting part, and at least they could possibly, I can tell, if you put the costumes right and do what they have to do, they will look like it. But what else needs to be done? Now, funny enough, I had a conversation yesterday with my editor. We were talking about it. He said something like, does this film even really need to happen? Because the animated series, the first 3 books, Avatar: The Last Airbender, already did what we needed to do. Do we need a live adaptation? And honestly, no, we don't. But if they're going to do it, there's a quite simple road to success here that they can just emulate. Now, what worries me is that the creators have already stepped out and said that what this is about to be is not what they wanted. Which worries me, because I would figure that they would just follow the track of what the original series had already done. Now, does it mean that without the creators there that this can't be good? Of course it still can, because the groundwork is still there. You don't need them to tell you what's going on, to look and see what was successful, listen to the fans to understand. So let's go over the things that need to actually happen and what they need to do for this live action Avatar film to actually be good. First thing, pacing. This series was 3 books here. So if they're gonna try and get everything done in one movie, not good. Remember, these characters grew up. How they were in the beginning of the series is not how they were at the end. Very, very big. Take your time. Get that growth. Get that character development. It was one of the best parts about this entire series was how they grew. And with their personal growth also came with their powers, right? Because their powers, first of all, it's akin to martial, because it is martial arts, right? The more you practice these skills, the better you get. But it wasn't like Dragon Ball Z or something where people just got spontaneously powerful out of nowhere. And their powers also grew with their understanding of what they were supposed to do with it. Because as you know, obviously, these are kids. So they're immature. The decisions they made were not always the best, especially with Aang. Aang technically being the oldest, but even though he's been on the planet longer, he's younger in terms of his earthly experience, right? And you saw that, and he was, you remember those times when he was learning firebending and him being reckless and stuff like that. Like, you have to show these things, and it would be great to see that in live action, right? If we're going to do something. So I think we have to get the pacing, get that character development, and don't try to skip steps just to kind of like shove it in this time frame. Do different parts if you have to, because that way we'll actually get what we want out of the characters in the show. The actual bending is the next thing that needs to be very good, because the bending is obviously based off of not just the elements, but actual martial arts techniques. So I would say make sure that these actors actually understand the movements and the basic principles of each of these martial arts, whether it would be in the Earth Kingdom, like these hard and rooted movements that come from like the legs up, and making sure that everything kind of comes from like a horse stance, versus the airbenders, which have tons of circular movements. You want to make sure that each of them understands the martial art for which these bending techniques actually come from. It's important because that choreography, that authenticity would be great. And even, like I said, building their character into that, because remember, a lot of the firebenders, they get theirs from like their inner anger. And then obviously the airbenders, they're like, Tibetan monks. So it's about being calm, and it's making sure you get those things in, because the show did that so very well. So that bending, it's not just about how it shows, it's about what it actually represents and how well these characters portray the styles. It's very, very important. Another thing, maybe might even be the last thing, is the setting. Every kingdom had a distinct look because once again, it's based on a certain culture, the way they dress. So you cannot skimp on the details here. That's something you want to make sure you get. Make sure how they look also embodies each and every kingdom, the personalities. Try to flesh this out as much as you can. Now it's in live action. You can really be creative in terms of really illustrating the difference between the Earth Kingdom and the Water Kingdom and all that. It's not like Netflix doesn't have the money, so put that budget behind showing the settings. Don't make it look like every kingdom just kind of takes place in a different spot in the same kingdom, because that happens sometimes. Sometimes the Netflix film, they skimp on it, like in a certain, how was it, like Defenders from Netflix. It was like, it looked like the whole the whole series took place in like one room almost, right? It was kind of crazy. And like, they're traveling across like the continent in this, so you need to make sure that everything is different. All these people are different. Maybe even like make the way they talk very different. Like get down to those details, and that's something that you can really add into this. And I think you might have something pretty damn successful if you pay attention to those details. Now this kind of harkens back, the last thing kind of harkens back to the first point I made about, like, you know, the growth and everything, but make sure you get the staple points of all these characters. Make sure they're not just recognizable by how they look, but how they act too. So it's kind of me circling back to that point. You know, the whole growth between, you know, Zuko, you know, being who he is, trying to impress his dad and whatever, and him eventually becoming who he is. Make sure you get that. Just really I'm kind of just circling back to that, because you have to make sure they are recognizable. And a lot of times these guys want to make things how they want to interpret them. And it's not. This is something that has a huge following, even though Korra wasn't as well received. A ton of people just love the series so much, they came to tune into that, I included. Did I like it as much as the original? No. But still, make sure you stay to the core of this, and I think this will be absolutely fine. Let me know what you think. Do you think this is even a necessary film? Are you looking forward to it? Are you worried about it? What do you think needs to be done to make sure that this stays a great adaptation, right? Let me know. And to the nerd.